All right, so thanks again for everyone for joining. This is the latest in a series of talks accompanying The Silk Road, A Living History, an exhibition created by Christopher Wilton Steer and presented by the Aga Khan Foundation. It was on display in King's Cross in London this summer, so we hope you had a chance to visit. If not, it's now currently on display in Canada. It's moved, and it's now on display at the Aga Khan Park in Toronto until March of next year. My name is Sushil Gokurakonda. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager at the Institute of Ismaili Studies. And it really just gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, who is Naureen Ali. I'll just say a few words of introduction about her and about her talk, and then she'll speak for about 30 to 35 minutes. And we're in for a treat because she's going to be showing us some special items from the Ismaili Special Collections. And we'll have some time for questions at the end and be wrapped up by 3 p.m. UK time. So the talk is today, IIS Special Collections, a journey along the Silk Road through manuscripts and coins. Naureen is a cataloguer and ad-lib officer at the Ismaili Special Collections Unit. Her work focuses on cataloguing, managing and collection care of special items, including Kutchki and Gujarati materials. She graduated with a graduate diploma in Islamic Studies and Humanities in 2013 with the Master of Arts in Gender Studies from SOAS. Prior to this, she pursued a BSc in Social Sciences with a concentration in Anthropology from Lahore University of Management Sciences. And her research projects include an analysis of Jamaat Khanas as gendered transactional spaces for Ugandan Ismaili women, as well as variations in gender roles amongst Indian migrant women in the United Kingdom. She's also worked as a coordinator at a female residential college at Lums, as well as an intern at the Aga Khan Trust for Culture in Lahore. So with that, I'll hand over to Naureen and sit back and enjoy.
Thank you, Sushil. Thank you, Sushil. It's a pleasure to be introduced by you. Thank you for joining us today, everyone. We are excited to bring to you the first ever live stream of special items by the Ismaili Special Collections Unit at the Institute of Ismaili Studies. Since establishment in 2013, the Ismaili Special Collections Unit, also known as ISCU, is responsible for preserving, conserving, collection, as well as study of special items, especially related to Ismaili history and heritage. I have always been fascinated by the reference of special items such as objects, manuscripts, rare books, and coins in the teaching of history and historical events. However, my work in the ISCU as a cataloger has granted me the unique privilege of exploring facets of history by being introduced to them by special items. And it is this approach that I have chosen for this presentation with you today. Before we begin, let us look at the itinerary of our journey for the next 30 minutes. This presentation is divided into 3 parts. The first part is that of knowledge, in which we will look at initially first 2 Muslim authors, one from Uzbekistan and another one, they're from Iran, but the work was produced in Fatimid, Cairo. And their works were translated and referred to in Europe for subsequent centuries, one of which is connected to the Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt, which we just talked about. We will also explore some Fatimid coins during this time and see what they have to tell us. Then we will travel to Iran, northern Persia, on the map. Northern Persia, we will explore Alamot period history there through the lens of Muslim and non-Muslim writers. The third will take us to several places. The third theme, we will look at the art of recording the Quran, calligraphy, the manuscript style, as well as printing. We will also explore works from Kashmir, China, as well as Hamburg for this theme. We will then connect this theme with the first theme of knowledge and Fatimid Caliphate through an object which is attributed to the Fatimid period. So let us begin. And I should mention that we will show you one object at a time rather than moving the camera. So there will be some transition time in between the objects, but I will make sure you have enough time to look at each object as much as you like. Thank you. The first object we have before us is a Latin translation of Ibn Sina's al-Qānūn fi al-ṭibb, that is Canon of Medicine. This particular edition was printed in Venice in 1608. Who's that? Yes. And Ibn Sina's Canon of Medicine is well known in Europe. It was created around the 11th century, but was translated in European languages for subsequent centuries. He is regarded, and this work in particular is regarded as one of the most important works of medicine and scientific history. And it was actually used as a textbook in Europe for several centuries to come. And you can see here, there are different images of physicians on the border. So that is really interesting to engage with as well. The next object we have before us is Optica Thesaurus by al-Hazan, which was published in the 16th century in 1572. And Ibn al-Haytham, also known as al-Hazan in Europe, was a mathematician, astronomer, as well as talked about the science of optics. He was born in Basra. Because of his work on human visual perception, he is considered the father of modern optics. His work is so important that in 2015, UNESCO celebrated the Year of the Light and light-based technology by marking a 1,000-year anniversary of his most famous work, the Kitāb al-manāẓir, the Book of Optics, which he wrote in Cairo. And it basically revolutionized the theory of vision. He was the first to conclude that light was an object, light was external to the eye and was not emitted from the human eye. And his work forms the basis of modern lens technology. What's really interesting about this is we often talk about the exchange of knowledge amongst different cultures. One important factor for that to actually happen is having a space where scholars are received and provided resources to study. One such space was an institution of learning that Ibn al-Haytham engaged with in Fatimid, Cairo, and it's called the Darul Ilm, or House of Knowledge, which was created by the 6th Fatimid Caliph, al-Hakim bi Amr Allah. He founded the Darul Ilm in 1005, and the institution served those who specialized in non-religious sciences. To gain a sense of this house of knowledge, we have an account from Caliph al-Hakim's intimate friend, which is mentioned by the Egyptian historian al-Makrizi and is mentioned in Helen's book on the Fatimid intellectual history. So al-Makrizi recounts that on this Saturday, the so-called House of Knowledge in Cairo was inaugurated. The jurists took up residence there, and the books from the palace libraries were moved into it. People could visit it, and whoever wanted to copy something that interested him could do so. The same was true of anyone who wanted to read any of the material kept in it. After the building was furnished and decorated, and after all the doors and passages were provided with curtains, lectures were held there by the Qur'an readers, astronomers, grammarians, philologists, as well as physicians. Guardians, servants, domestics, and others were hired to serve there. Into this house, they brought all the books that the commander of the faithful, al-Hakim bi Amrillah, ordered to bring there. That is, the manuscripts in all the domains of science and culture, to an extent to which they had never been brought together for a prince. He allowed access to all this to people from all walks of life, whether they wanted to read books or dip into them. One of the already mentioned blessings, the likes of which had been unheard of, was also that he granted substantial salaries to all those who were appointed by him there to do service, jurists and others. People from all walks of life visited the house. Some came to read books, others to copy them, and yet others to study. He also donated what people needed: ink, writing reeds, paper, and inkstands. This shows us the extent of learning that went in the house of knowledge. Before the printing age, an important part of studying works by other authors was also copying them. The yearly endowment granted to Darul Ilm sheds light on the scribal activity that took place during the time. For the paper for the scribe, about 90 dinars were allocated yearly, and for repairing torn books, around 12 dinars. Paul Walker has highlighted that lower middle class families survived on 12 dinars per year around that time, survived on 24 dinars per year around that time. This gives us a sense of the volume of scribal activity during that time. We can also see that Caliph al-Hakim focused on conservation of manuscripts and had allocated money for it. This brings us to the next item we have lined for you, which is a Fatimid coin. So I'll transition that item now. This is a coin from Caliph al-Mustansir's time. It is dated 464 AH and was produced in a Palestinian mint. So we're holding it up close to the camera for you to look at, and you can see a central inscription here. There's a blank ring, and then the margin inscription here. There's a blank ring, and then the central inscription on the side, in the middle. Since coinage gives information about who ruled when and where, Fatimid coins have been studied for their historical importance. Other features on the coin, such as Quranic quotations, legends, Quranic quotations and legends, tell us about particular beliefs during that time. Striking gold coins was also an expression of caliphal presence. During the Fatimid Caliphate, especially in the beginning, die cutters initially followed earlier prototypes, which included inscribing the Quranic verses in a singular border. Jonathan Bloom has explored this and mentioned that not only was this because the craftsmen were the same from before, but also this was due to coinage being specially conservative in terms of monetary exchange. People may not readily accept unfamiliar coins. Hence, the value of Fatimid coins has more to do with fineness and weight, just their gold content, rather than design in their initial years or change of design, to be more particular. But as the Fatimid dynasty had been in power for a couple of decades, Caliph Imam al-Qaim felt secure enough to adopt a new coinage, and Caliph al-Mansur subsequently had coins redesigned, so the circular borders came to dominate the field. In some cases, there was a blank ring surrounding the border, which we just saw, and the text was removed from this inner band. We will now move into looking at a coins catalog to see this difference, but we're holding up the coin for you to take another look if you like. So I'm referring to a corpus of Fatimid coins by Norman Douglas Nichols. And what I found fascinating while doing my research was here, coinage from Imam al-Mahdi's time. I'll hold it up for you. You see one ring in the margin and then the central field. You see a few examples of those. So inscriptions on the side and the margin and in the middle. However, as the dynasty progresses, from al-Mansur's time, you've got a ring here on the side, so the marginal inscription. Then you've got a blank ring and then central inscription. And it evolved into other sides, other ways as well. So in some cases, the central inscription was removed and the ring inscription in the margin and in the inner bands was introduced. And sometimes you had a dot, but in some cases there was nothing in the middle. So you see a progression of the design, the coins. Another point to note that gold for these coins came from tropical West Africa, which was linked by caravan routes to North Africa. Bloom also claims that this was revolutionary, this change in coin design, because people had familiarity with the older design for about 2 centuries. So to change something like that was revolutionary. And in terms of the gold content, there is one, Bloom has mentioned this, there is one story that Caliph al-Mu'iz's dinar had such a high gold content that they were considered pure gold. In the memoirs of Jodar, who was a chamberlain to Fatimid caliphs, and he was later freed, he has mentioned that after he was freed and elevated in rank, he was sent 1,000 dinars by the Fatimid caliph with a letter that mentioned that no riches are purer than the money he's offering him. Another important feature of Fatimid coinage is that even during times of economic crisis, the value of the coin and the quality of the coin did not decline. So how did they manage to do this? This brings me to another object. This is part of the Aga Khan Museum in Canada. I understand the exhibition is in Canada right now, the Silk Road exhibition, so our Canadian audiences can take a look at the Aga Khan Museum objects as well. This is gold Fatmi jewelry, and they have got similarities between Byzantine jewelry and Fatmi jewelry, but the quality of the gold and the quality of the work is quite intricate. So it's also mentioned by Bloom that jewelry like this, other things that were made of gold, were melted down in times of economic crisis to mint coins then. And not many have survived. Not many jewelry specimens have survived. But you see a heart-shaped pendant here, which is quite interesting. And then these are crescent-shaped, this crescent-shaped jewelry. We will now travel to northern Iran to see what treasures await us there. The first item that we have before us is a copy of the vellum document made sometime before the 17th, of a vellum document made sometime before the 17th century. This vellum document, which this is a copy of, has 6 lines of text, and is said to be a copy of the sale deed of the fortress of Alamut, which was situated on a high rock in the central Elburz Mountains. The seizure of this fortress in 1090 by Hasni Sabah marked the foundation of an independent Nizari Ismaili state in Persia, and later on expanded to a series of fortresses in other areas, including Syria. The historian Ala al-Din Ata Malik Juwaini has mentioned that the castle was bought for a draft of 3,000 dinars. The next item, which we have for display today, is a manuscript of this work, of Juwaini's work, Tarikh-e Jahān-gushā, History of the World-Conquerors, which talks about the history of the Mongols and Mongol invasion. So we'll now transition to the next object. This is a 13th century copy of the work, which is quite close to the author's to Juwaini's death, which is there's a difference about 40 years there. And it's called Tarikh-e Jahān-gushā, History of the World-Conquerors. Juwaini was the earliest historian of the Mongol invasions, and was with the Mongols when they converged on Alamut and other Nizari Ismaili castles. He mentions in Tarikh-e Jahān-gushā of his examining the library at Alamut and selecting books of his choice before burning the rest. As a result of this and the massacre of Nizari Ismailis during the Mongol invasions in 1256, many primary sources about this time have been lost. Some information is, however, obtained from sources quoting other sources, such as Juwaini's work, which quotes some other works during that time. With regards to the mention of the library at the Alamut fortress, it is important to note that the Alamut period was marked by strong military presence in a mountainous terrain, and still during that time, there was a library present within the fortress which hosted Muslim scholars. They also maintained chronicles recording the detailed history of the Persian Nizari state, which has not survived. Non-literary sources for this period include some coins and ruins of the castles. Since 1141, Coins were minted in Alamot itself. And for the next 80 years, for the first 80 years, only gold coins were struck. In 618 AS, that's around 1223, silver coins were introduced. And I'll show you a coin from the Alamot times as well. This is one side of it, and I'll turn it for you. The next item we have before us is about 11 centimeters long. It's a travelogue by a Spanish rabbi, Benjamin of Tudela, who traveled to Syria in 1167 and is one of the very first Europeans to have written about the Ismailis in Syria and Persia. He also referred to them as Hashishin and recognized the existence of some connection between the Syrian and the Nizari branches of the sect, but failed to recognize that they were Muslims. This particular book was printed in 1633, so 17th century. And you can see a printer's mark here, right here. This is by Elsevier Press, Elsevier House. And in this, you see a vine entwined elm tree. And there's an old man here on the side. It's meant to represent wisdom. That is one school of thought. And on the left side of the image, that reads non solus, which means not alone in Latin. I'll hold this up for you to see this. Another important feature while we're holding the book, it's got a Latin and Hebrew translation. So you can see the Latin here briefly. Because the binding is really tight, I'm not going to open it any further. A glimpse into the Latin bit. And the other side has Hebrew text. So this logo, which we saw, that was a vine entwined elm tree. It's meant to symbolize the relationship between the scholar and the publisher. So they can't work alone. They both have to work together. And during my research, what's really interesting is while researching on Ibn al-Haytham, I found an article on Ibn al-Haytham, which is on the Elsevier House's website. They're still currently in business for many centuries. And this also kind of signifies the connection over centuries from a printer's side as well. Having explored Fatimid Egypt and Iran and Alamot period, Iran and Alamot period, we will now move to the third theme of recording and writing of the Quranic text. And I will move to the next object now. I'll hold it open for a couple of seconds for you to look at. This is basically a 19th century work. It was created in about 1831 in Kashmir. And you can see Naskh calligraphy here. There's a Persian commentary on the side, translation commentary. And then illumination, and it's got blue and gold illumination. It's considered the signature mark of Kashmiri calligraphy, Kashmiri Quran manuscripts, to have this combination of illumination within its manuscripts. And you can also see some floral decorations on the side, and the surah names are decorated as well. Before we move on to exploring different aspects, something to think about is the role calligraphy plays in conveying the text. So Sheila Blair has worked on this, and she's explored the meanings of the English word calligraphy, as well as the Arabic word for calligraphy. So she mentions that the English word derives through the Greek word callus, beauty, and graphos, writing. So beautiful or elegant writing. The calligraphy word for Arabic is related, or the root of the word is khat, which relates to a notion of a trace or trace of the past. So the idea of tracing the past, of preserving something from the past and creating it for the present. She also draws a distinction in terms of regular writing and aesthetic writing by referring to Jeffrey Khan's work, who mentions a difference between script competence and script performance. So script competence would be the forms realized by a scribe's careful execution, and the script performance would be the actual result of a scribe's writing. So let's say a grocery list that we type up is closer to script performance because it's meant to, it may not always be meant for aesthetic appeal. It's to note down information. And the point of noting information supersedes, or conveying information may supersede, the aesthetic appeal. However, carefully executed calligraphy work, as well as illumination that's put together with it, it not only seeks to convey information, but does so in an aesthetic way, aesthetically pleasing way. So both the aesthetics as well as the recording of the information and the conveying of the information is important. And the better the calligraphy is, the closer it is to script competence. There is great emphasis that has been placed in the Muslim world in copying the Quran, that is the word of God, that's considered the word of God. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Kashmir became a new center for the production of fine manuscripts, most of them written in Naqsh. There's a book called The Decorated Word by the Khalili Collection, and it talks about Kashmiri manuscripts. And it actually mentions that according to the French traveler, Victor Jacquemot, in 1831, some 700 to 800 copyists were working in Kashmir for the copying of manuscripts for Quran and other texts. So calligraphy, handwritten manuscripts is one side. What about printed texts? This brings us to a 17th century, this was published in 1694, text of the Quran, which was published in Hamburg. And you can see here that there's a marked difference between handwritten Arabic and printed Arabic here. Not only is there an aesthetical difference, but the content had errors as well. Printing in the Muslim world was much slower. What was the reason for it? There are several ways to look at it. Basically, there are several factors in this. The first is logistics. So there was a necessity for more individual characters to print Arabic. So Sheila Blair has mentioned that if you consider the complete font, including vowels, you need more than 600 characters. There were also religious motivations that word of God had to be carefully copied. There was a primacy of calligraphy in transcribing the Quran. The most vocal objections, there were also economic ones, because the most vocal objections, according to Sheila Blair, came from the calligrapher themselves, who would have been put out of business, the calligrapher and the scribes. However, the first Muslim press was found in Istanbul in 1727 by the Hungarian convert Ibrahim Mutafarrika. Before its closure in 1742, it had issued 17 publications, including maps and dictionaries. The advent of lithography boosted Quranic printing as manuscripts conventions were maintained. Another thing to remember is in the Muslim world, the printing was done by people who were more familiar with the calligraphy related to the Quran and the Arabic script. So they brought that knowledge in with themselves, and they used it to apply that to the printing exercise. And that changed things as well. This brings us to the next object. What we're looking at it. This is a copy of a Quran from China. It's got Arabic script here, and then a Chinese translation and commentary. You will recall that we saw Persian translation next to the item in the Kashmiri, next to the Quranic verses in the Kashmiri version, the Kashmiri manuscript. So what strikes me about this usually is we're looking at, as Muslims, the Arabic verses, but also engage with it in our local languages or wherever they are created. And that creates a different literature of its own. So this one's from China, from around the 19th century, relatively 19th century. And an important part, which fascinated me about the Silk Road exhibition, is Christopher has written an article on the Silk Road website where he's actually met with a female calligrapher from Istanbul who's keeping the tradition alive. She's a master calligrapher and has students who she gives the ijaza, that is the permission to create calligraphical works to. And it's a very interesting article. I suggest you check it out. We've talked about calligraphy. Another important part of Quranic manuscripts is illumination. So we saw vegetal motifs. We also saw the, the connection of gold and blue. I'll take the manuscript here just to show you again. So this is another page from there. So you can see the gold and blue combination and the floral patterns and the Persian commentary on the side. There is a gold, there is a blue and gold combination here that links us to the last object that I had mentioned, the mystery object that is attributed possibly to the Fatimid Caliphate. And this is in the collection of the Aga Khan Museum. It's very interesting to check out. I'll just put the note here for you. This is a folio from the Blue Quran. One view is that it was produced in Kairouan during the Fatimid Caliphate. And then the text is copied in gold, and the parchment has been dyed in blue, basically. And what's interesting is there's no illumination apart from the script itself. The script itself becomes the source of illumination here. It's one of the most lavish Qurans ever produced, and folios from it are spread out in different museums and collections around the world. So, we talk about knowledge exchange and the exchange of ideas. The fact that you've got an 11th century object here, 9th to 10th century object here, and then the Kashmiri Quran from the 19th century, not only is there an exchange of knowledge and text throughout the centuries, but there's also an exchange or the things that inspire us sometimes. So perhaps this was a source of inspiration for the Kashmiri Quranic manuscripts. This is just a thought, but it's worth looking at further. This concludes the number of objects I have to show you, and I will now move back to the other camera. Hi. So I hope you enjoyed this journey with me. What's most fascinating to me about this journey is when we look at historical artifacts and objects, rare books, manuscripts, coins, we did recognize some themes today, including knowledge production. What's interesting is the curiosity that mankind has always had to look at the past. So the artifacts and the objects themselves become windows into past, which we can peek through to gain a sense of history and culture. A thought I will leave you with today, and this is something I think about often, is what in our current world will become windows to the future for future generations. Thank you. Sushil, can I just say thank you to the people, if you don't mind right now?
Yes, of course.
So this talk would not have been possible without Dr. Wafi Momin's encouragement. I'm very grateful to him for encouraging me to deliver this. So thank you, Dr. Wafi Momin. I'm also grateful to Dr. Noor Mohammad Shah for his help, for Dr. Sayyid Noman al-Haq, who inspired me to look at art in a different way, especially Islamic art. His classes really made a difference to me, and I remember them still. And I'd also like to thank the Aga Khan Foundation, especially Christopher Wilson Street, who gave me an opportunity to present today, as well as Sushil and Rehana from GCD, who've been working with me tirelessly to make this possible. And if I've left anyone out, I'm sorry about that, but thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Naureen. And such a, I thought I knew a little bit about the collections, but I'm just blown away. It's a really, really fascinating presentation, and I've got some questions of my own, and we've got some great questions come in as well. But just before I even go into that, I just wondered, if people want to find out more about the collections, is there any way they can go online just to find out more? And we've had a few questions asking just to see, close-up images and things.
Yes, no, that was something I would love to highlight, and it's the plan as well. So I'm happy to tell you that one, we already have a few manuscript catalogs that are already published. Some of them are available in the ebooks version in the IIS website. Apart from that, we will be launching special collections database in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be launching that in the next couple of weeks. So you can actually log in and look at the different objects that interest you. But we'll have way more there as well for you to explore. So you're welcome to do that, and we hope you get a chance to look at them. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us through the IIS website. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Great. And Naureen, do you have time for a couple of questions just now from people? So anyway, I was personally, just really, just not only hearing about the material history of these objects, but also hear you talk about the sort of economic, political, cultural circumstances of their production. Also, the thing you mentioned about the difference between script competence and script performance, which isn't something I really thought about before. So, so many interesting areas. One thing which we didn't have a lot of time to touch on, but I thought was interesting, was just to learn more about the importance of textiles in the Fatimid period and in the royal context in particular, if you could maybe comment on that.
That's an excellent question, Sushil. Thank you. In terms of the importance of textiles, so you've got Tiraz fabrics from the Fatimid period, and it's really interesting because they were actually commissioned by the royal court, so by the caliph himself, with inscriptions. And there was a separate department of textiles within the royal court who was responsible for that, for maintaining the inventory. And also the people who were part of the court were gifted the Tiraz, gifted textiles. Tiraz was a band, but they were gifted special textiles to wear with inscriptions, to get them, stitched and wear them. Or they were given robes as well. So it had a certain royal presence to it. And it's really interesting. I mentioned the eunuch Jodar from the Fatimid period. We talked about his biography, where he'd received some dinars from Imam. But upon being elevated in rank, he was also given a robe that was stitched. And the caliph, according to one source, the caliph himself had dictated what would be inscribed on the textile. That is one view. There may be other views as well, refuting it, just putting it out there.
Great. So a couple of questions about the coins. So one question was, why did the Fatimid caliphs change the style of their coins? I don't know if that's something you touched on, but and related to that, where did the gold come from as well to mint the coins?
Yes, so in terms of why did the style change, one could be a new design introducing a new caliphate itself. So, right. Human beings are visual creatures. So when we see something, we associate with it. So if there were coins of the same type going on for centuries, yes, there was monetary security, but people may not make a connection with a new caliphate. That's my theory. It's worth being looked at. That's one. But the second thing, they wanted to maybe introduce more text into the inscriptions. And hence the margin and the central field may not have given enough space. That's another view. So that could be one. And having the confidence we talked about, having the confidence to change the monetary, to change the inscriptions and the design there. These are two of my theories, but it would be worth looking at other people who've explored coins. I would also direct you to Jonathan Bloom's work. His one part, so he's written a really interesting book in association with the IIS. It's called Arts of the City Victorious. So he looks at Fatimid, art in there. But one view is that the caliphate gained more confidence and felt, that they could change it. They could put in more caliphs' names or things like any other parts that would refer to any other Quranic inscriptions that would be more specific to their caliphate. But I would suggest you check that out to start with.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's another interesting question, which I don't know if you can comment on. Someone says, sorry, I wanted to ask the speaker whether she can comment on the relative rarity of coins from Alamut in comparison with Fatimid coins. I've seen many Fatimid coins, but this is the first time I've seen a coin from the Nizari period.
So thank you for that question. I have thought about it several times as well. So Fatimid coins we find more for sure in terms of what is known about them. There's way more literature on them. There's way more quantity of them that have come down to us. Alamut coins are quite rare. There is a book called Eagle's Nest by Peter Wiley, Ismaili Castles, about Ismaili castles, and this was written a few years ago. So according to his research, there's one article there by Dr. Verdun, I think. According to his research, when he was doing the research, there were about 16 known Alamut coins around the world that he knew of, that he could find for his research. So yes, they are quite rare. I'm assuming more were found since he wrote that, so I won't give you a full number, but they're definitely way less than Fatimid coins. One point to consider here is how the dynasty was, kind of overthrown. So through the Mongol invasion, a lot of things were destroyed from the Alamut period, and that may be one reason they have not come down to us, rather than them not being minted. The other part is they were engaged in military defense a lot. So there is one period that Verdun talks about, for which we have no coins for a few years. And one thought is that either they were too busy to mint it, or they had other things to mint coins, new coins, or they have not come down to us. They have not survived, or they're not known to exist right now.
Yeah, there's so many theories, and yeah, it's super interesting. It's great to see so many more questions coming in. I might just take maybe one or two really quick ones just to wrap up, because I know we've got to finish soon. Maybe this is like a more sort of difficult question, but it's more, someone's asked, a few people have asked actually, what is your favorite object in the collection? Do you have one that speaks to you, or you enjoy looking at or learning about? I don't know if that's because a few people have asked as well how you selected these objects to show us today, and I don't know if some of these are your favorites.
Yes, so thank you. I love that question. I like to ask that question when other people are presenting, but I can appreciate how hard it is to pick an object. How did I choose them? So basically they were chosen based on areas around the Silk Route. What areas do we have, and what corresponding objects do we have that we can show? And I also tried to keep in mind their links to their caliphate and what they can tell us about it. My favorite object would have to be, I have two. I'm going to try and choose. They're all special, and they all are beautiful to look at. It's a privilege to work with them in any way possible. But my favorites would be Avicenna's Canon of Medicine and the Book of Optics, the Latin version, because I've heard about them for years before I saw them. And, I had heard about the influence of Muslim thinkers and how things changed later, how knowledge, the knowledge economy was in Europe then, and, it changed in the Islamic world. So to connect with those again and to appreciate that they were received in Europe. And also they highlight that knowledge is not restricted to one place. It's enhanced by exchange. One thing to remember is Avicenna's work drew up on Chinese authors as well. So you need to have trade routes. You need to have routes where these things are accessible. You need libraries where you can read that. So yes, so basically knowledge does not exist in isolation. So these kind of highlight it even more. So yeah, I would pick these two.
Great. And actually, I should say, so people, again, stay tuned on the IIS website, and I've added a link in the chat to our newsletter as well. So as soon as we are able to sort of share news of the online collections, and coming soon, as Naureen mentioned, in a few weeks' time, just you'll be the first to hear about it. So, some really exciting things, and we can learn more about these just incredible collections that we have here, and just, you know, wonderful privilege to sort of sample some of them today with Naureen. I think we'll probably sort of leave it there. I'm just going to close with this slide just to tie it back to the Silk Road, as you know. So this is, again, if you're in Toronto or if you're able to visit, do go check it out. Check out the Silk Road exhibition, and more information is on the website. And really, just thanks again to Naureen and Special Collections Unit. Just, you know, really rare for us to do a talk like this, and hopefully we'll have more of these in future. And thanks again for everyone's questions. I'll pass them on to Naureen. So if you haven't sort of managed to address yours, you know, we'll look at them certainly, and thanks for sharing them. I think that's it from me, really. Thanks again, Naureen.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you, Sushil.
Bye, everyone. Bye.